Welcome back to another episode of DEC Does What? I'm Sean Mahar along with
Erica Ringwald.
And today it is summertime, but we are going to talk spooky things coming up here. Erica, what do we got on the show today?
We've got Casey, formerly Pendergast, now Casey Kennedy. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Ashley Meyer. They are wildlife biologists joining us today to talk about the wonderful world of bats.
Bats. This is going to be fun. So you two, what got you into bats and why are bats so important?
I had a change of careers. I was actually in sports medicine, of all places, to start with. And I decided to transition into environmental science. And I really wanted to get into wildlife conservation, but thought that door was kind of closed to me. I feel like a lot of people that go into wildlife conservation are like coming out the womb with a butterfly net or something. And I had not followed that path. And I just figured I was hot to trot on any kind of environmental job that I could get and feel good about. So while I was making that decision, my mom at the time was volunteering for this climate change organization and happened to be volunteering with two former DEC biologists, Brian Swift and Al Hicks. And Al Hicks happens to be the twice former bat biologist for DEC. And he gave me a great pep talk, made me feel good about changing careers and going back to school. And when I came, I was living in North Carolina at the time. When I came back to New York, I called up Al and I said, hey, really want to get some field experience. I want to meet people. I want to network and I want to see what is a good fit for me or not. Do you know anybody that I could shadow or do volunteer work with? He put me in touch with a man named Carl Herzog, who was his successor.
The true Batman of DEC.
Don't tell Al about it. So Carl was kind enough to give me a chance and take me underground. I met Casey then. And
That's back when Ashley used to wear her FedEx outfit to come caving
I
with
was
us.
working at FedEx at the time as a way to make some money while I was transitioning careers. And I went on my first bat hibernaculus survey and was mesmerized. I asked Carl a bunch of questions. I learned a bunch about bats. I started interning with Samantha Hoff and helping her with some bat acoustic analysis. And I was, just got this kind of serendipitous introduction to the world of bats. And I found them fascinating immediately because they are. And I thought, wow, DEC is a cool place to work. These people are great. I should go there. And eventually I got a technician position working in materials management, working on hazardous waste compliance. And eventually, while I was taking courses, when I went back to school and I qualified for the biologist position, I ended up working on grassland birds. Actually, it was my first biologist position and working on impacts to listed species from large-scale renewable energy projects, and some of that incorporated bat work as well. And I was actually working across the aisle from Carl, and I was still helping with some of the bat work. And when he retired, I happened to be like the only person in the office that had that kind of skill set already, and I was able to step into his position. So here I am working with bats, and I'm very happy about it.
I was, I think, a little more pragmatic in my approach to working with bats. I knew I wanted to work with some sort of interesting species, something a little bit more unique. And everyone wants to work with like charismatic carnivores, right? That's everyone that graduates with a wildlife degree. But I looked at where there was a lot of federal funding coming right now, where there's a lot of research going on, and bats had just kind of the white nose syndrome had blown up, and it was a big thing. And I knew that there would be jobs in the field, there'd be money for jobs in the field, and I could kind of move forward in there. And bats are the only flying mammal, incredibly unique species, super interesting. So I looked specifically for jobs working with bats, and that kind of internship with National Park Service led me to Region 1, where I was a technician first, and then I moved up to central office to do bats, and I've been sticking with them ever since.
Awesome. Could one of you sort of unpack for us what are sort of a lot of people think bats are creepy, right? Rather than mysterious and intriguing. But what are the benefits of bats? What do bats provide us with?
Absolutely. I'm going to jump on this one.
Go for it.
The most important thing that bats provide for us, they pollinate agave plants, so no tequila, no bats.
Yeah.
Very, very important. And mezcal.
Yes,
Yeah.
mezcal. I'm a mezcal girl, so I appreciate that.
I like the smoke.
But more importantly, bats, I think the more commonly referenced is that they are a huge pest control for agricultural pests. And so it's a really difficult thing to put either a monetary value on. Generally, the studies are small scale and kind of extrapolating out across the range or the species. But they're a huge component for pest control for all the farmers throughout New York State, throughout the entire U.S. and the continent. And then a huge one is biomedical research. So bats are, they're considered scary or disease-ridden because they do have a ton of diseases. They
are a rabies vector species.
Correct, yes. And that's kind of the most beautiful thing in my perspective about bats is they have this incredibly unique immune system where they can have these infections but kind of suppress them so they're not actively infected. That's why they can have rabies for such a long period of time without succumbing to the symptoms or to the disease. And we learn a ton of things about disease and immunology and just biomedical things from bats in general, which is, I think people overlook that component, but that's why we appreciate them so much, or at least I do.
Yeah. And in addition to being able to carry a lot of viruses and not being able to get sick from them, they also have some really great like anti-aging and anti-cancer characteristics where I don't know if you'll remember going back to Biology 101, but on our DNA, we have these like caps at the end called telomeres. And as we get older, those telomeres might fall off, break down, and our DNA starts to break down, and we experience senescence or aging. And so we get wrinkles, we get gray hair, all that kind of stuff. Bats are really good at repairing their DNA and their telomeres and retaining them. And so they have this kind of like anti-aging
property.
Yeah.
So if I eat a bat, will that help my gray beard not be gray anymore?
It's not how that works.
No.
But it is being studied to help with some how that could be applied to human medicine.
Awesome. That's neat. So how are the bats doing in New York?
Yeah, you mentioned white nose syndrome.
Yeah.
We need to come back to that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, first, how many bat species do we have in New York?
We have 9 bat species. Do you want me to list them off?
Sure.
Okay. So we have 3 species of bat that are known as like tree bats or migratory bats. They go south for the winter to warmer spaces. And they are our eastern red bat, our hoary bat, and our silver-haired bat. And then we have our 6 bat species that stick around in the winter and hibernate. So we have our big brown bat, our eastern small-footed bat, our little brown bat, Indiana bat, northern long-eared bat, and tricolored bat. Thank
Good
you.
job. Yeah,
Good. A+.
I thought I was going to forget one.
Bats are migratory, or some of them are migratory.
Some of
Are they
them.
following similar like migratory patterns to birds? Are they overwintering
Good
in the same
question.
spots, or like what is that like? Or are we still learning about that too?
I think it's generally a mixed bag like birds.
Yeah.
We have some migratory bats that will overwinter. On Long Island, you'll find some of the silver-haired bats year-round. And you'll have a lot of them that will migrate, down along the coast, very similar migratory pathways as birds, which is why they're equally kind of affected by wind turbines and kind of some of those green energy options.
Yeah.
So we're getting into permitting in a second, but Erica, you were going to ask about white nose syndrome?
You mentioned white nose syndrome earlier, and I know that has had a devastating impact on all of these or some of these bat populations. And we're talking about 98% decline, 90% decline. Like those are big losses in these populations. Can you tell us a little bit about what white nose syndrome is and why it's so devastating?
Yeah, so white nose syndrome or white nose disease, it's a disease that emerges in the bats after they've infected with this fungus. So it's a mycosis that's come from Europe. They kind of tracked it historically back to Europe and Asia. There's been a couple different strains across throughout the years, and they've co-evolved there. So the bats there, they aren't dying off in the same degree because they've kind of worked through it, tolerance and resistance to the disease. But here in the U.S., it was introduced, we think, around 2006. That's when we first started seeing it in Albany, in a cave out by the Albany region. And from there, it's just spread across the country. And we've seen massive declines as these bats are hit with this fungus growing on them while they're hibernating. So it's causing them to wake up more frequently. It's depleting their fat stores by that way. It's also causing dehydration by growing on their wings and exposing them to other infections, secondary infections. And for a lot of these bats, they emerge in the wintertime because it wakes them up. They go out looking for food and there's nothing to eat. It's winter and they get predated upon by, owls, raccoons, things like that. And so in the early stages of white nose, you'd hear stories of predators just sitting outside caves and mines and just picking them off as they flew out in the wintertime, or just little bat bodies littered outside the entrances to some of these spaces. And that's when the real, the 98%, 90% declines were like seriously visible across the landscape. And that's still happening in a lot of the other states as it's continuing to emerge across the country and affect different species of bats. But here in New York State, we have several species that were a little bit more severely affected.
Yeah, so northern long-eared bat was our most severely affected species. It used to be one of our most common species in New York, and it suffered about a 99% decline throughout most of the state.
Wow.
Yeah. It has since it was listed as a threatened species by the federal government, and then it was recently uplisted to endangered. But we do have what seems to be kind of a holdout on Long Island, which is where Casey works, and has done some research on that. And it seems like our population there has done a little bit better than the rest of the state, and similar to populations on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. It seems like a couple of different factors could be helping them along their shorter winters, meaning they don't have to be in hibernation as long. They don't have to retain as much of a fat storage as bats on the mainland, and insects are out longer into the fall and earlier in the spring, so they can feed later, emerge earlier, start feeding again, and fend off the disease a little bit better than the bats on the mainland.
And we're also seeing on Long Island slightly different hibernation locations. So the mainland, we have these caves and mines that can have, 20, 30,000 bats in them, which is incredible to see, to go in there and look at this many animals kind of all at once. But on Long Island, we have maybe 2 or 3 hibernating in crawl spaces under homes or bunkers or culverts, things like that. And so that smaller number, it kind of limits the spread of the disease. And so for the northern long-eared bat, they can build up their fungal loads very quickly. They, one of the first bats in the wintertime that has like a maximum fungal load, whereas like a little brown bat, they also get the disease. They also are declining about 87 to 90%?
90%, yeah, in New York.
But they don't build up as much of an infection as quickly in the caves and mines. So, it seems like they're kind of spreading it around the cave, giving it to everyone else, and then not dying as badly as some of the other bats.
Yeah.
So if I'm a homeowner and recognizing that these massive population declines are occurring, what's the biggest thing that I can do to help our bat populations?
So unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have a cure for white nose syndrome that is being studied, and there are a bunch of different researchers across the country that are working on that. But on an individual basis, things that you can do to help promote bat populations, keep in mind that all 9 species of bats that we have in New York State are all insectivores. So anything that helps promote insect populations will help support bat populations, help support their prey base. So I know pollinator gardens are a big thing right now, but the type of pollinator garden can matter as well. So bats really like big juicy moths and beetles. And so any plants that will promote populations of those types of insects can help promote bat populations as well. Keeping our waterways nice and clean, not polluting them. That helps lots of wildlife. But of course, bats are also dependent on water and streams. And
and I'll say, Ashley previously mentioned Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. Those are some of the other locations where we studied these coastal populations of northern long-eared bats. And on some of those islands, we've had folks or partners that are, people have built artificial kind of hibernaculus, these little mini bat caves for the northern long-eared bats. And so it's something we're looking at here at the state, trying to roll out on some of our state properties. But if someone has property on Long Island and they're interested in, building their own little bat cave, we can help you out in the process, give you some recommendations, and maybe you can help an endangered species along the way.
that was a great plug.
Herzog houses.
It's going to kill us.
Well, we're having a fascinating conversation here talking bats with Casey Pendergrass and Ashley Meyer, 2 of our wildlife biologists. When we come back, we'll go more into what it's like to research bats in New York State.
Know it, avoid it, report it. It's summertime, which means it's time for DEC to encourage New Yorkers to report harmful algal blooms, or HABs, to the New York HABs online notification reporting system. HABs can form in fresh water when nutrient levels are high, temperatures are warm, and winds are calm. HABs can produce toxins that can pose health risks to people and animals. To report a HAB, go to dec.ny.gov and search HABS.
So I have a picture here. I was recently on a trip up to the Adirondacks, and there was a little visitor in our room, sort of inside the wall. So I just have, I believe, some little feet.
Oh, look at those toes.
But he also was scraping all night to try and get out of that little space in the wall. And so I woke up in the morning with dust on my pillow, and then he reached out, which there was some screaming, I will admit.
Oh, that's okay.
And then
So can you tell by its feet what kind of bat it was?
Yeah, what kind of bat is that?
So if you zoomed in a little more and we could look at toe hairs, we might be able to make a determination.
I don't know if it's that
Totally.
if it's that high risk.
See a cow car.
Yeah, but bats in New York are generally very similar in appearance, especially the cave bats. So without like a face shot that really distinguishes the ears and the nose, it's pretty hard to ID. I would say if you are in another similar situation where you have a bat in your house and maybe you're sleeping, you would want to make sure that you don't have any marks on your body, that you didn't have any sort of exposure in the evening. If you did, I would say you should capture that bat and then have it tested, just because you don't want to ever have in a situation where you're sleeping and you have a bat in the same space as you. If you did wake up next time and you heard something like that, you could try and get the bat out of the room so you're not sleeping with the bat all night.
There wasn't a lot of sleep.
Oh.
Do you get questions like this all the time where
Oh,
people show you
yeah.
pictures and say, what's this bat?
Yes, constantly. And you need a banana for scale or something,
Yeah.
at the very least. But if you do have a bat in your home and you're wanting to get it out, you should close off the interior doors. You can stuff like a towel or something underneath it to seal it off, and then open the windows. And the bat, I know you probably have a very nice home, but the bat doesn't want to be in it. They don't want to be
Don't
with
assume. It's very dirty.
Despite what people might think, they don't want to be in your house. They don't want to be in your hair. Nothing about that is appealing for a bat, unless you have maybe a moth in your hair also. But you open up the windows, and especially around like sundown or sunrise, or just before, that bat will want to be active, will want to be feeding, and they will make their way out. So yeah. And if you are going to handle a bat, as Casey recommended, if you want to get it tested, or if you're trying to trap it and get it outside of your home, make sure you're wearing protective gloves, and leather gloves would be best so that they can't pierce your skin through them. Put it in a little box or something like that, and then you could just like place it on a tree outside. You don't want to put them on the ground. They're not like birds. They're not great at generating their own uplift. They need to hang from somewhere to use gravity to assist them to take off in flight. So putting them higher up in a tree if you can, and they'll make their way out.
What's the biggest misconception about bats that you hear most about that you would want to correct?
A lot of people think that every bat has rabies, and that is far from the truth. They are a rabies vector species, but we've found from the submission of bats to the health department and being able to see how many bats are actually interacting with humans and looking at how many actually test positive for rabies. Only, I think it's 3% of the bats that get submitted actually have rabies, and that's only the bats that are interacting with humans. And so it's a smaller percentage of them on the landscape that are actually carrying rabies. It's probably under 1% that are actually rabid. It's a risk, but maybe not as high of a risk as most people might assume.
I'll jump in on that as well. For me, it's the bats eat mosquitoes, or bats will eat 1,000 mosquitoes in an evening. Bats do consume a lot of different insects, and as Ashley was saying, those tasty, juicy moths and beetles are kind of like their preferred prey items because you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. You're eating a steak instead of a couple pieces of rice. And so that whole study about bats eating all these mosquitoes is a single person put a bat in an enclosure with a certain number of mosquitoes, calculated out how many were gone at the end of the evening, and said, okay, over this whatever 1 minute or 10-minute period of consumption, the bat ate this many. So across an entire evening of feeding, the bat would eat 1,000. bats aren't going to be eating the entire time, right? It's when they're opportunistically encountering a mosquito or any sort of insect out in the world. So I like to correct that one when I can. They do eat mosquitoes. They're helpful for mosquitoes. They're helpful for all sorts of insects and bugs, but not just mosquitoes.
So can you tell us a little bit about the hibernaculous surveys and how we conduct those and what we glean from them?
That was a great word, glean. So we have a winter survey program that we've been running since I think that as far back as the 80s, possibly earlier, but I'd have to double check. But in the wintertime, so our 6 hibernating species that I mentioned earlier, they will find somewhere underground that is slightly above freezing, but still pretty chilly, where they can drop their body temperature very low, keep their metabolism very low because they have nothing to eat. There's no insects out, and they can just hang out literally throughout the winter until spring when the insects come back out. And so it's a great opportunity for us to actually get an idea of what our bat populations are doing and how they're doing, and basically take a census of our bats. And so we can go to these underground locations where we know bats are hibernating and go ID the different species, count them up, and see how the trends look year to year from site to site. And so a lot of these spaces are going to be abandoned mines or caves throughout the state. And so we'll go in with a team. We wear helmets, headlamps, cave suits, all that kind of stuff.
Do you wear garlic too?
We do not wear garlic. They are not vampires. Sean, you should know better.
I know, but I had to ask. Just 'cause.
No. I mean, you can bring, some sandwich with garlic aioli if you want.
Sounds tasty.
Just to check that box if you want. So yeah, we go underground and we, in simple terms, we just go and count bats. Some of the sites, so 2 of our species are clustering species. So our little brown bat and our Indiana bats can form very large clusters of bats. And we don't want to spend all this time sitting there counting thousands of bats by hand. And then you get to 562. No, wait, was that 462? Oh, you got to start over.
And are they all staying in the same spot as you're counting, or are they moving around?
Yeah, so they're sleeping. They should be sleeping.
Yeah.
And so to help make that process a bit more efficient and accurate on some of our surveys where we have a lot of little browns or Indiana bats, we'll use underground photography. So we take cameras with us with these big lenses and flashes on them, and we'll take photos of these clusters, and then we'll bring that back to the office, upload the photos, and be able to count them in a more controlled environment.
It's a pretty unique situation to be able to count, 20, 30,000 of any species at a single time like that. So we're fortunate because bats in general are cryptic. They're hard to capture. They're hard to track. They're hard to do a lot of other research with. So we're fortunate in that aspect.
Yeah. And because we were already doing these hibernaculous surveys well before white nose hit, we were able to really get there at ground zero and see what a difference this disease was making. If we hadn't been surveying before that, we might have missed it. We would have been late to recognize what it was doing to our bat populations, and then late to start the research in terms of, okay, what's causing this? How are the bats reacting? What can we do about it? All that stuff would have been delayed. So it's great that we were able to kind of get ahead of it in that way. Shout out to Al Hicks.
Yeah, and did doing research on common species when you think you shouldn't.
Yeah.
So you're pretty much just counting when you're down there? Or are you collecting any samples too? Like samples if you see white nose on a bat? Like, are you taking any of that samples, or like blood samples or anything too?
It's kind of like, have you ever seen Sesame Street?
Mm-hmm.
You know the count?
Yeah.
So you have 1 bat, 2
No, we do assist a lot of researchers as well in some of these hibernaculous sites. So recently, Ashley's been assisting some folks from Virginia. No, it was Rutgers that was doing a study on UV sanitation. So they were dragging a massive UV machine like a hospital room would use down into these caves and mines and sanitizing different sections to see how during the summer
when the bats are not there.
Yeah, seeing how it would affect the spores from the fungus as it over summers, I guess.
And so then we'll go back in the wintertime when the bats are there and take samples, take swabs off their little noses and wings, and see how their fungal loads are looking after treatment.
So, I mean, you're underground, in a cave, in the dark, middle of winter, thousands of bats all around you. Like, obviously, for some, that's got to be really spooky, but you two obviously love it. But what's been your craziest story of, like, a bat survey when you've been down underground? Like, what's the coolest thing you've seen or the weirdest thing you've seen?
I mean, I'll say that we are weird bat lovers, but we also are normal, and we get very freaked out sometimes in caves of mines. One of my first times going underground, I was sent on a side shoot from a caving community. We usually go in with a lot of cavers because they're very comfortable there in those situations. And they're like, oh, go look down that side passage for bats. And, I'm going and it's getting tighter and tighter. And at some point, I have one arm in front of me and one arm behind, and I can't move my head at all. And you get stuck a little bit and your light's kind of blocked, so it's dark, and you're just like, oh no, am I going to get out of here? Is this the end? And I was telling Ashley when I first started out, I used to sing like weird pop songs to myself. Like that was like Miley Cyrus, like the climb moment for me. Like I remember distinctly being so terrified and then started singing to myself and then wiggled back out and felt good. And after that, I don't think I was ever really scared in caves or mines, but
I would say I think I had my worst experience this year. So bats are not the only animals that will use these sites to hang out in the winter, and sometimes we'll come across other wildlife, which can be fun. And sometimes
like what?
Like a porcupine, maybe.
Oh,
often, yeah.
Yeah, and so there was a site I was in this past winter where you had to belly crawl through a pretty tight space to get in, and this porcupine was hanging out there and was using that entrance as its litter box, essentially. And so my face was, an inch or two away from a large pile of porcupine feces.
You never know what you're going to find.
Yeah, it was not fun to be covered in that. And so as soon as we had to crawl back out through it, of course, you have to go through it twice. And so as soon as I got out, I just rolled around in the snow and was trying to get as much of it off me as possible. But all I could smell the rest of that day was porcupine poop on me.
And probably some urine, too.
Oh, for sure.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break and be right back to talk more about bats here with Ashley and Casey.
Heading out on the water this summer? Remember to clean, drain, and dry your watercraft, trailers, fishing gear, and other equipment to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species. Invasive species are non-native species that cause harm to the environment, the economy, or human health. To learn how you can help stop the spread, visit dec.ny.gov and search clean, drain, dry.
Welcome back. We're talking to Casey Kennedy, formerly Pendergast, and Ashley Meyer, wildlife biologists with DEC, about bats. Every year, we ask New Yorkers and visitors alike to stay out of caves if you can. And if you go in, to just reduce your footprint and be quiet. Can you tell us a little bit about why we ask folks to do that every year? And typically, it's around Halloween.
Which is also International Bat Week.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so it lines up very nicely, and it's right at the start of hibernation season. So going back to what Casey mentioned about white nose syndrome and how it affects bats. So a lot of times it's causing, or most of the time it's causing this secondary mortality where the fungus itself isn't directly killing the bats, but it's causing them to wake up more often than they should. And in rousing, they are working through their fat stores faster than they should be and potentially not making it to spring because of starvation. And so anything we can do to reduce more disturbance to these bats can help them potentially fight off this disease a bit better. So any human presence in these underground areas where bats are hibernating can cause more disturbance to the bats. They're waking up even more on top of what the white nose syndrome is doing to them and causing them to work through their fat stores even more. So we don't want to add to that. So we ask folks to stay out of caves and mines throughout the winter while bats are underground to help reduce additive disturbance to them.
And that way you avoid the porcupine poop.
Also that, yeah.
And anything else you may find underground.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear more about that, check out our most recent episode on our mining program here in Mineland Reclamation on DEC Does What. But one of the questions we get a lot up on the executive level here has to do with our permitting and permitting approach and tree clearing windows. Can you talk to us a little bit about, why this is important, why we have these windows in place to, avoid impacts to bats, but why do we set these, tree clearing windows and how is that helping bats?
Yeah, so I think Long Island is pretty much a hot spot for a lot of our tree clearing issues. It's people are building, you get that urban sprawl coming out from the city, and yet we also have a remnant population of an endangered species, federally and state endangered species. So something I deal with quite often in my everyday job. We've done a lot of research looking into the times of year that the bats are on the landscape, the shorter hibernation period on Long Island, which is allowing them to live a little bit longer. It also means that they're on the landscape a little bit earlier. So we have a longer clearing, a shorter clearing window, a longer prohibition on clearing in the summer there on Long Island. And really the main window we're looking at is the maternity season. So when the mom bats are out there, they have their pups, they're in the trees, and maybe they can't get away if you cut down a tree. So typically you cut one down, the bat will kind of fly out and go somewhere else. But in that period, either the mom can't leave, she won't leave her baby, or the children are stuck there. So that's kind of a no-go zone, absolutely. And even certain other times of the year, in the spring and the fall, when they're first coming out of hibernation, when they're really reduced fat stores on Long Island, it's a very critical time for them to get out on the landscape and start foraging. And if you cut down the tree that they're in, maybe they survive, they can fly away, but they just lost their roost and they're wasting a lot of energy. Now they're maybe flying in the daytime and they get predated. Mm-hmm. And then again in the fall as well, that's kind of when the bats are swarming all together and they're reproducing. That's when they kind of mate up. So it's really important that we leave some of these landscape spots for them to do that in the fall. And so it seems kind of crazy, I think, for a lot of folks that we have such this period of no cutting for so long. But there's all these different periods that are critical to a population to survive. And when there's so few individuals left like we have on Long Island, it's important that we respect that period for them.
I think one of you had noted that there is only one maternity colony. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is a maternity colony, and how sort of special is that?
So a maternity colony is typically a tree, but it could be an alternative structure as well, such as a porch, where a female bat usually gets together with other female bats. That can range in how many there are depending on the species and the site. But that's where they go. They usually come back every single year. They tend to have high site fidelity, and that's where they go and raise their pups together. So it's this group of reproductive females that get together and they raise their pups together. And pups are juvenile bats.
Yeah, and I mentioned that the maternity colony that we're discussing is tricolored bat maternity colony. So that's a species that's suffering in New York State as well. It's proposed for federal listing, and we actually have the only known maternity colony in New York State on Long Island in Locust Valley, so in Nassau County, kind of a spot where you maybe wouldn't expect to find bats. Some folks reached out to us several years ago, and they have been keeping track of this maternity colony, taking photos of the pups and the moms coming back each year, and so.
That's cool.
The last 2 years, we've actually been doing a radio tracking study in that area. So putting out radio transmitters on the female bats before they give birth, tracking them to see what sort of landscape trees they're using as they kind of leave the porch site, coming back, and where they go to have their young. And so again, this year, I've been getting photos actually just recently of the mom, the female bats came back after having raised some pups. It's towards the end of the season, so we usually don't see them anymore, but they just came back yesterday. Brought their pups back to the site, maybe to show them, hey, this is where we do this each year, just so you know, because they were very young when they first have them, and they kind of come and go with the pups from over a couple week period. But the final sighting was yesterday, and then they took off.
So cool.
That's cool. How big is the range are you seeing from this radio telemetry study? Like, how far are they flying on a given day?
Yeah, so our first bat we captured this year was a pregnant female. She actually went about a half a mile and then another half a mile the next day. So she went over a mile away in the first few days of the study, and then they're all kind of going and coming back.
All right, so one of you is a certified Zamboni driver. Tell me about that.
Wait, what? I didn't read that part.
That would be me. Yes, yeah. I went to.
Oh, that's so cool.
I went off to school in Canada, and
Seriously, you had to go to Canada. Okay.
I went to Canada. I went to Montreal. I went to McGill, and when I got to school, I needed a job, and it's hard because my French was good, but not that good, and I didn't have like a work permit for off campus, and all the work study jobs were taken, and I went to the ice rink because it was right next to my dorm, and I kind of convinced the rink manager. He told me I had to play rugby and then I could get the job, and I already played ultimate frisbee, so I told him as long as they're not at the same time I'll do it, and of course they were, so I didn't have to play rugby, but I did get the job at the ice rink, and it is so funny to be the only American working at the ice rink, driving a Zamboni amongst a bunch of Canadians who are really pissed off at you for taking their dream job.
That is a dream job. And as Erica knows, I build a backyard rink each year.
And
so
his own Zamboni.
I did. I made my own Zamboni. But we'll have to have you over and you can give me all the
Yeah.
pointers and tips on
So you know how hard it is.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We'll come back to this, but Erica shared her picture, and I don't have a picture, but I'm going to paint a picture for you of one of my real true first bat encounters. So I grew up on a lake, and one night I was going out, wanted to do some, sunset fishing and whatnot. And I just happened to be walking down, and all of a sudden I felt something hit my shoulder, and I looked down, and there's a bat looking at me, looking at it, and it like teeth out, like wings open. It hissed at me, like I could still to this day, like it is so visceral, like just seeing this creature, like. And I just remember instinctively I grabbed it lightly because I didn't want to hurt it and kind of threw it and then just bolted to the house and just ran away. So what's your typical bat story like? And do you have any ones where you've had a bat encounter that you didn't expect?
Yeah, no, I will say that, your encounter with that bat is pretty similar. I feel like we hear stories like that quite often. And I like that you said hissed at you because that's what I think every time I handle a bat, I just feel like they're angry kittens. Like they just like.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah, they like their big teeth, and it's like they can't. Generally, most of the bat species in New York have their teeth are very tiny. We use leather gloves for a lot of the tree bats because they're bigger. They have to be able to fly these long distances. But most of the cave bats are actually small enough you can just handle them with 2 pairs of latex gloves. Their teeth won't even puncture it. And I always think when you're holding one of these little bats and they're hissing at you and their little teeth are going, they're just an angry little kitten.
Yeah. And then you just give them a little Q-tip to chew on in the meantime. Yeah.
So carry a Q-tip with you.
I guess I will. Now when I'm fishing, that'll be right there, next to lures and stuff. Well, Casey and Ashley, thanks so much for coming on the show today. This is a great little adventure down to the caves of bats and the world of bats and the great research and work that you're doing to help steward our bats. So thanks for being on today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, Erica, that was a very interesting conversation today on bats.
Bit about bats.
We definitely learned a little bit about bats and the great work that our team here at DEC is doing. And Erica, what should New Yorkers do?
Get outside and bring a Q-tip.
DEC Does What? Is a production of DEC's Division of Communication, Education, and Engagement. Our theme music is an original composition by Mike Menza, wildlife technician with DEC's Division of Fish and Wildlife. Like what you heard on this episode? Please leave a review and share this episode with others. Want to learn more about DEC's wide-ranging efforts to protect New Yorkers and the environment? Visit dec.ny.gov or connect with us on social media. You can find us using @NYSDEC. For more information on DEC Does What, visit dec.ny.gov/podcast.